So there was a lot of interesting things out in the first couple of weeks of April, and Wild Beyond is one of those things that I tossed in as an extra this week, just because I wanted to talk about it in a timely manner, and I knew it would get busy. And get busy is exactly what Wild Beyond does on this record. This is a Pennsylvania-based black thrash metal band who formed between the current vocalist of Deva, who was previously the guitarist vocalist in a band called Infernal Stronghold. Now, if you don't know them, they were kind of a punkish black thrash metal band who formed in the kind of the early 2000s and kind of had a party from there on out until the late 2010s. Intermittently active. So he is joined by members of a couple of other bands. You might recognize the bassist from Basilisk, now Morgul Blade, and the drummer, who's quite good, is played on one of Woods of Ypres' albums, as well as Sylvan Realm and some other groups. None of that really reflects what this style is outside of Infernal Stronghold, because Edward Gonate, the Davis vocalist and the main composer on this record, really does take charge, and the editing process never really allowed for any interruptions other than making sure it all lined up with quite ambitious drum performances. So rather than pick at it a little bit more, let's just get right into a song and you can see the barrage of it all. So black thrash metal is not the only influence for this record. I think that's an important thing to emphasize, is that we get influences from everything from epic heavy metal, speed metal. There's a bit of the chasms, left-hand technique on some of these songs. There's a lot that went into this record, and there's a lot that came out because it's just what I describe it as a kaleidoscopic barrage of an album, because it is dense with ideas, and it is not prone to repeat itself on a regular basis, and a lot of it is just pure stream of consciousness attack that is a little bit whimsical, very aggressive, almost, I would say, fairly technical. And a lot of this comes from a maybe a late 90s USBM, but not the Dimmu Borgir type stuff, approach, where bands like Absu and Ritual and Summon all pressed the pacing of the sort of thrashing black metal idea quite a bit, and it all became kind of frantic and technical for a lot of bands with sort of a competitive death thrash edge, and part of that applies here. But the swinging notion of like earlier Norwegian black metal and how that applied to heavy rock also applies here. So it's like, I don't know, black thrash, Carpathian Forest with a bit of heavy metal in the middle, and I'm not even doing it justice. This is just sort of a there's nowhere to rest. There's no end in sight on these songs, and some of them are actually pretty tuneful. And usually it's when they're leaning into the sort of more obvious Celtic Frost or sort of Bathory-esque moments that give pause, give a bigger riff, and give a moment to breathe. So I think this is going to be a really hard record for a lot of people to approach if they're looking for anything but spectacle, because it's not a memorable record in terms of arrangements. There are quite a lot of it never quite unleashes either. It sort of creates full blocks of each song and just attacks it and moves on to the next. And it's quite a short record too. So I found myself, the first several times I ran through it, I was like, what the fuck is this? It's so much all at once, and it's not necessarily coherent. They haven't sewn together these ideas with much sense along the way. A couple of songs will jump from kind of a jaunty rocking moment right into a black thrashing moment without anything to pin it together, and not in a way that's slick. It's not cool. It's just like kind of dorky even. So, I mean, I appreciate that. It does remind me of a lot of kind of underground Midwest black metal of the kind of early 2000s and late 90s. Well, it's the kind of thing that you'd find in like Barbarian Wraith back in the day or something like that. So definitely into it, definitely interested in it, definitely enjoyed this record. But as far as recommending it to the average listener, I don't know. I think that it'll be a tough sell for a lot of people because maybe you know kind of what to expect, but once you've sat with this record 3 or 4 times, I'd be interested to know what people feel about it, because it sort of I went back and forth with this one quite enough to where I'm not sure that it's accessible enough for the average listener. So uh, tune that to your own taste and see if that's your thing. Check it out yourself and come to your own conclusions, right? Otherwise, there's a lot more detail in the review, and check it out.